Hi, this is Alex Levin. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Regal, and I have here with me Satya Patel from Homebrew, and we're very lucky to have him as one of our investors.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Excited to be here to chat with you.
So if I think back to how we first met, it's sort of funny, we were raising a seed round, it was basically done. And somebody said to us, you have to meet Satya, you have to meet Satya, he's fantastic. And luckily we took the call and we're just, wowed by, I think your breadth of experience, across both being an operator, and being in sort of in MarTech or ad tech, and obviously going on to being an investor. So, I mean, maybe to start, can you tell us a bit about your background, where you got started and how you ended up being an investor?
Yeah, like most things, there was no plan to get to where I am today, but I've had the good fortune of being able to hop back and forth between the investing world and the operating world. So, really started my career more on the investing side as a junior member of a venture capital firm during the dot-com boom, like in the mid 90s, and then moved to the operating side and was at DoubleClick in the early days. And that was my first exposure to the ad tech, martech world. Left DoubleClick to join Google and was there to help build the AdSense business over a number of years and kind of deepened my experience in ad tech, martech. And then went back to the venture side by being a partner at a firm called Battery Ventures and spent a number of years there. And then all of our ex Google colleagues were off doing interesting things, and a few of them had gotten Twitter off the ground. And so went over to Twitter to be VP of product. And that business also had obviously an ad tech, martech component to it in terms of the revenue model. And then finally, almost 12 years ago now, got together with one of my former Google colleagues to start Homebrew as we were both looking for opportunities to work together again. And so that's a very quick summary of the career and hopping back and forth. I've always tried to optimize for just two things when I make career decisions, kind of the problem and the people. I find like it's really easy to try to especially for analytical people, to create your spreadsheet of the 30 criteria and the rankings and weighings and all that. And I found like if you are able to work on something you care about with people who you trust and who you can learn from, it frees you up to do your best work. And so all my career decisions have been oriented around that rather than like some grand master plan of what I was going to be doing down the road. I never expected to be a venture capitalist towards the end of my career, but here we are.
So I've spoken with, over the years, a number of people who've worked with you, and everybody, thinks very highly of you. So, you had a lot of options in those days. How did you pick, both DoubleClick, which ended up being bought by Google, and Google? Like, what was it, to your point, like as you were looking at companies like that stood out, like why did you pick those?
Yeah, so I mean, DoubleClick during the dot-com boom was kind of the original kind of internet advertising company, and so I saw a couple of things there. One, I was a big believer, that the internet was going to be here for a long time and have a meaningful impact on the world, and that it was going to change business models. And DoubleClick was kind of at the forefront of that. And I was living in New York at the time, and DoubleClick was like the preeminent New York technology company that was kind of emerging. So, from a problem perspective, it seemed like kind of the most interesting ecosystem to be playing in if you cared about what the internet was going to become. And then from a people perspective, it was this unique place that had this mix of sales, because advertising is sales, but technology as well, because it was an internet company and building kind of real advertising infrastructure from a technology standpoint. And so as I met the people there, I was struck by kind of this combination of skills, which I really appreciated, because having worked on the venture side, I saw a lot of businesses at that time that had only one set of skills necessary to build a business. And I really found a team of people who kind of had a balanced skill set necessary to scale and build a business at DoubleClick. And so I had the good fortune of becoming a product manager there. And one of the things I got to work on over the course of time was helping to launch DoubleClick's entry into the search advertising business. And so as the PM, I was also kind of the lead BD person and talking to all the search engines of the world at the time, which included Google, but also Find What and Ask Jeeves and Canoodle and like all these different groups. And as I met the Google folks, they first said, like, if you want to work on search, you should come work here. And
Yeah.
two, as I started talking to folks there, it was clear like they were the smartest people I'd ever met and that I was just going to learn a ton working with them. And so well before the acquisition by Google. I left DoubleClick to join Google, and then everything comes full circle always. And 4 years later, Google ended up buying DoubleClick, and so
You know, say people forget that in those days it was DoubleClick who was the leader in what we now consider like normal Google search. Like when you go to Google and like those things come up, that wasn't Google's ad business at the time. They had a very different ad business. It was, copying is too strong a word, but it's DoubleClick who did it first, and they bought DoubleClick for that business. So like,
well, the real thing is like Overture
yeah,
launched the
Overture was
pay-per-click
original.
business, which I guess it was GoTo before it was Overture,
Yeah.
and then it was part of Yahoo. So that's really where the pay-per-click business came from. DoubleClick was the original like banner advertising business,
Yep.
and more importantly, from Google's perspective, it was the creator of kind of ad serving technology, and that's really why ultimately Google bought
Yeah.
DoubleClick, was for the ad serving technology, which helped it expand its business into both graphical advertising and text advertising, as well as expand the ad network itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's all Google, but in those days there was a lot of
Yeah.
variation.
Yeah. And then just to finish answering your question, the reason I ended up going to Twitter was similar. Like, I was an early Twitter user. I was fascinated by the power of the platform in terms of the way it helped kind of echo voices or amplify voices that weren't often heard, and really kind of be this platform to help level the playing field between the head of the tail and the long tail in the same way that I thought that Google did in many ways. And there were a bunch of ex-Google folks who I knew and respected who were over there, and they said, come over here and help us turn this from a project into a business. And you always try to make decisions, as I said, based on people and problem. And it was definitely one of those where if I didn't take that opportunity, I was not going to sleep for a few years, probably wondering what if. And so
Yeah.
I ended up doing that.
When you look at Reddit today, like people are drawing all these parallels and saying the average revenue per user on Reddit is so low because they haven't been able to monetize. Or if you're a skeptic, you'd say, well, it's a different kind of user. They're not, it's not really like Twitter where, it's a different kind of communication. But do you look at Reddit and see the parallels and think they will be able to build the same kind of ad engine, or you think it's a very different mechanic there?
I think building an ad business at scale is super challenging from a lot of standpoints, but I think there are probably more challenges for Reddit than even for Twitter, just given the nature of the communications and the audience. Really, what limited Twitter at the end of the day was audience growth more than monetization. I think that if they had continued to grow, there would have been lots of opportunities to continue to build revenue per user in lots of different ways. But the fact that growth stalled was the big problem for Twitter. And Reddit may end up having a similar problem.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm really honest, I'm not active on Reddit at all, and like Twitter, like barely. So like,
I'm the same way at this point for both of those.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning using them, and I basically at this point don't at all. So it's a shame. So, eventually, you'd been a VC before. Hunter, I don't think had ever been a VC,
No,
right?
he'd been an angel investor, but he had never
Right.
been a VC before.
So how did you guys, first of all, you guys are not polar opposites, but like spending time with you, it's fun because you guys have such a different style. Like, how did you guys decide you were the right team and like you wanted to be in venture capital?
Yeah, I think you appreciate this because you started Regal with Rebecca. But like anytime you have a job, you probably leave with like the 4 or 5 people you hope to work with again, right, in some meaningful way. And when I left Google, it was around the same time that Hunter was moving from Google over to YouTube to run product for YouTube. And he was just one of those people that I knew that I wanted to try to find ways to work with again. And I actually tried to recruit him to be an EIR when I was at Battery Ventures. And we talked about him potentially coming to run consumer product at Twitter as part of my team. But ultimately, he stayed at YouTube. But we had become family friends. We'd done some angel investing together. And we were both thinking about leaving our respective jobs and got together for one of our frequent breakfasts. And it was just a moment in time where if we didn't take advantage of the opportunity to work together, then it was probably never going to happen because we'd be tied up doing the next thing for 10 plus years. And so really what we decided first and foremost was that we were going to work together again. We had no idea what we were going to do, but we said, let's spend the next however long it takes to figure out what it is that gives us the opportunity to work together, but really spend our time and energy on the things that will be really satisfying in both the short term and long term. And the outgrowth of all that was Homebrew.
So you guys, got off to a quick start with some. What was your first one where you like put the money in and like you knew that was like, you don't have to like say it's your favorite child, but like what was the first one where you knew it would be big?
I mean, every time you write a check, you think you know it's going to be big, right? But yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, our second investment ever was a company called Plaid. Plaid is now kind of this really well recognized, but also really important company in the fintech ecosystem, right? It kind of powers uh, data access to everyone's bank account. So if you sign up in some random app to give that app access to your bank account, it's probably powered by Plaid. And so, our fourth investment ever, I think, was Chime. So I don't know that I can say like there was one company where we're like from day one, like this is going to be the one, because you want that to be every company you invest in. But I think that we've always tried to invest with the idea that every investment has the opportunity to be a super important company, but maybe even more importantly, that every team we support has the opportunity to be a team that we want to back again and again, regardless of whether this specific company works or not. And
Yeah.
so, in both those instances, that was the thing we were more sure of, is like, these are people we're going to want to work with for the next 30 years. Hopefully, the companies work in the way we think they're going to work, but the people was the bet.
So what if you think about and this is asking you to be self-reflective, which I know you are, but if you think about your time, like do you sort of enjoy more the original sort of investment, or was like the exit? You've had some big exits now. Was that more rewarding, where then everyone sort of saw the fruition of what happened with these entrepreneurs?
I will tell you honestly, like, we've never celebrated an exit. Like, we've never like done more than maybe you say, hey, like high five on that day. But we've never like done a dinner to celebrate it. We never bought ourselves anything. For us, we know like at the end of the day, we don't play that big a role in the exit, right? Like, it's the founders who do all the hard work, and hopefully we're able to contribute along the way in some way. So for us, it's the journey. Uh, it's much more meaningful, and the things that we celebrate are much more about like, oh, we did this particular thing, which the founders are grateful for. Those are the things we celebrate more than like an exit. An exit is a monetary outcome that hopefully is the outgrowth of the type of relationship that we build with founders, but we don't look at that as the thing to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I believe it. I remember talking to some of the folks you had invested in before us. Literally, they'd be like showing me their phone, like, "Oh, I text with Satya every day." Like you were effectively their co-founder, which has its pros and cons, I'm sure. But I think they really valued the relationship that they built with you over the years. And still, like, we love going to these dinners, that you have every year with all the other founders, so we can see what everyone is working on. So, to skip, I guess, forward a little bit ahead, when we were raising seed, Rebecca and I, if I put myself back in those days, like we had run big outbound phone teams in home services, knew the technology that we were using was not great, had a pretty clear idea on what the technology could be. Basically the idea was to bring more marketing automation concepts into the contact center to allow, you to individualize, personalize, phone outreach in the same way you did in marketing world and email. Didn't really know if this would go, we knew home services was a good category, didn't know how many other categories would fit or not. Like that's sort of when I think we met you. So when you saw that, like, what was it that then sort of got you interested? I think when we first had the conversation, you said something to the effect of, oh, we had a prepared mind, like we understood
Yeah.
this quickly because we were sort of ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, I had the good fortune of having a little bit of a cheat code in understanding what you guys were doing, because one, I'd worked in the ad tech, martech land for so long and understood kind of what categories worked really well with like direct paid advertising versus what worked well in brand advertising, and what was led to immediate conversion versus conversion over a long period of time. Secondly, as you'll recall, like when I was at Battery Ventures, we invested in Angie's List, and I worked very closely with that team and saw how that business was built, and again, like the types of challenges that existed in home services. And so I think the moment that you and Rebecca pitched us, the thing that resonated was that high consideration purchases are just different in terms of what kinds of information that consumers need and,
Yeah.
and businesses need to make those decisions. and we had lived that problem and seen it. And so the idea that voice and kind of the human touch would be important in those types of decisions resonated really strongly. And then it was also clear that there was a lot of white space. Like nobody had thought about bringing the data and automation that existed in other parts of the marketing landscape to voice and to this part of the conversion funnel, so to speak. And so I think it's the experience that led to kind of the resonance of the idea. And then, obviously you and Rebecca are a killer team with complementary skill sets and had lived the problem firsthand as well. So it was one of the easier decisions we've ever had to make.
Kind of you to say. Well, it's easy for us to like include you once we met you. I think like if I think back to those days, there were two things particularly that I look back on. One, which we kind of realized at the time, but maybe not even as much. One, it was so contrary to the common narrative. Like you'd go to, even today, I go talk to people and say, hey, like we have a business where like our customers are intentionally calling their end user and they go, what? Like, do people answer the phone? Like, is that a thing? Like, and they're like, oh, the youth doesn't answer the phone. Like they're on the TikTok and the, whatever, like and people literally would go, my kids don't answer the phone when I call them. Like, how could your business work? And they're shocked when they find out that, if email answer rates in a specific situation are 3%, ours are 30% in exactly the same situation, and
Right.
blows people's mind. So I think one, like we didn't even realize how contrarian it was, but I think like looking back, it's one of the gifts that keeps giving, because there's not 10 people on TechCrunch saying they're doing exactly the same thing as us, because it just doesn't make sense to most people if they haven't lived it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had an earned secret, right? As like people talk about, and it's not one that everyone has access to or even understands when you talk to them about it. And I think that's given you and the company a real advantage.
Yeah, so that is, I think, one. And the other one, which again, we kind of understood, but there's just so much room for software to actually have a difference, make a difference in this. We had been in consumer businesses before that in theory are software businesses, but so much of our job was operations, if I think about it. So much of it was building software to like, do a scheduling thing, like a very tactical thing. Whereas now, like part of what's amazing about this is we can say our North Star is how do we help our companies, drive the sort of best lifetime relationship with the customer, so they drive the most revenue with that customer. If that's our top line goal, how do we use software to get to that aim? And it's so different being sort of on this side where we can, do all these amazing things. Now, particularly sort of AI is coming into it much faster than we expected. But I think those two have been very helpful. And like I reflect on it and I go, of course, like it's obvious, if you're going to have a VC backed business, you want one where you can invest enormous amounts of R&D in software and then eventually like have a very low variable cost.
Yeah,
I
but
don't think we thought about it
I
as
think
much clarity at the beginning.
yeah. Well, I think you guys talked a lot about that at the beginning, and certainly the opportunity that we saw, as I referred to earlier, is that you could bring the same level of automation and importantly intelligence to voice that had historically been brought to, paid search and web conversions.
Yeah.
Right. Like that entire funnel is optimized. And there's no reason, given where technology is, and even as you said, more importantly now with AI and LLMs, like to introduce the same level of automation and intelligence to the voice interaction to optimize that, not just for the business, but also for the customer, right? To make it a more efficient process and a more information rich process for them. So I think it's really powerful for the business, obviously, because they'll hopefully get a higher conversion rate or a higher order value, but better for the customer too, because they get the information that they need to make the best decision for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of to us this like difficult thing now where, we're out there proselytizing saying, guys, like, you should treat every customer like, 1 in a million. So our line is treat millions of customers like 1 in a million and use data and technology to be able to do that. And then we see friction, right? Pushback. And the pushback is, well, I have lots of agents in a current contact center. I just spent 2 years implementing all this thing. My CIO is worried about whether my data is going to be safe. And so I don't want to change anything. And so it's interesting that, the pushback has nothing to do with, no, we don't think that's good for the customer. That's not where it comes from. The pushback comes from, I I don't want to do the work to change. And so as a customer, I guess as an end consumer, like end user, I'm disappointed by that because I think the technology exists today to give a much better customer experience. And it's not some AI far off, like whatever. Like if brands today switch their data and technology strategy within their contact center, they could treat each customer like an individual and know that you, Satya, like, have kids and have a certain car and have a certain life. And so they should show you certain products and not others instead of treating you the same way they treat me on the phone and deflecting the interaction or sending it to something that is not actually what you're looking for. So it's sort of like this interesting moment where the technology has been proven in marketing world, to your point, but there's a lot of friction and resistance in this specific industry, in the contact
Yeah,
center industry.
I mean, this is why we're such long-term believers in what you're doing because history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and those are the same objections that people had to paid search back in the day,
Yeah.
right? Everyone was spending on banner advertising and billboards and radio and TV, and it really had nothing to do with the paid search format. It all had to do with like inertia. And I have teams of people who allocate money this way, and we work with these agencies and all this kind of stuff, right? And over time, the efficiency of the channel kind of won the day,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh, yeah. For
and
me, it's, I think about like when we were in the consumer business, part of my job as a marketer was constantly looking for new marketing channels. And it was like subway ads in New York were a new thing. We were the first,
yeah,
direct mail in shared mailers was a new thing. We had like five or six of these. And, they're very effective because you're the first to it. And to some extent, the same thing is happening in contact centers now. The contact centers where from the very top, they shift the incentives and they say, you're no longer only tasked with reducing cost. I'm going to also task with you as a contact center of increasing the LTV of a customer. That's the first step. Sometimes you see it as like a chief customer officer gets appointed and that
hmm
they're in charge of marketing and contact center, which is a good start. But so, hey, now you have a revenue target. And to your point, what's the next step? Well, they start going, shoot, how am I going to do this? Like, and in a contact center today, you don't have A/B testing. You don't have data on
right.
revenue. Like they don't. They have data on what was the average handle time. They don't
hmm
know if, hey, the longer call actually resulted in a higher customer LTV because they don't even have that data in their reporting. So I think,
Yeah.
to your point, it's exciting to be able to like be there as it's happening. As an entrepreneur, the nerve wracking part is, how fast is this going to happen? Like we have
Yeah,
wind at our back,
exactly.
like a strong
Yeah,
wind or a weak wind, and that's always nerve wracking.
totally. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, but hopefully the when is sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's what you hope as an entrepreneur that
Yeah.
it's gonna, so you're always trying to create that movement. And I think one of the hard parts about creating this movement is it's so contrary to the narrative. So you have, you find people that get it and they're, they proselytize. But if you're outside of that, people go, well, no, like phone seems like a difficult channel. But so anyway, to one of the interesting things I think happening now in our business is when we first met 3, 4 years ago, if you had asked us like, is AI going to transform this business? I think our answer would have been sure, eventually, like you'll replace humans for, virtual agents, but it's far away and, don't worry about it. Even 6 months ago, honestly, that would have been my answer. In the last 6 months, playing with the different capabilities around voice agents, how it handles interruptions, how it handles complicated, if things that humans do naturally, how fast it responds. Like it is shocking how much better virtual agents in voice have gotten in 6 months. Like I'm at a point now with Rebecca where we're wondering, like, for certain customers, should we tell them, don't even think about using our software, switch directly to these virtual agents. Now, it's only for very specific use cases where it's good. So for like rescheduling calls or
hmm
very simple qualification. But that's a very difficult position for us because on one side, we're building a software product for agents in contact centers to be able to handle it better. On the other side, there's now this AI technology that doesn't need any agent interface, doesn't need any of the stuff we're building. So we have to decide like how much do we push one versus the other. And so I think like, the example I always give is the Kenyan one, where you go to Kenya and there's no phone lines overhead. Like people went straight to cell phones. Like we're at one of those moments where some companies that listen to us about turning their contact center into a revenue driver won't do it by using all of our, new fancy technology we built over 4 years. they're going to go straight past what was in marketing, straight to this, virtual agent technology that's now existing that marketing really never got an advantage of. So I think like some brands are going to, leapfrog basically into this new way of doing it.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a leapfrog in the same way though. I would argue that the agent capability is one that like obviously generates the voice and can deal with a individual interaction, but the overall interaction, the customer journey is going to still need optimization. And so I look at it as saying like, yes, a enterprise may say, hey, we don't actually need live agents. We can use these AI agents. But part of what you guys build is still going to be useful for them in terms of optimizing the journey that is enacted by the AI agents. Because
To be fair, I hope that's the case. So
yeah,
it's funny. I'm hoping that AI is smart enough to be able to handle the interaction with the customer, but not so smart that it replaces the marketing automation software that we're building. So and I think probably at least for a while that's going to be the case. That there's
absolutely.
going to be, to your point, two different systems. There'll be the rails that it runs on, and they'll be separately whether you put the agent on or not. And I don't know how long it'll take for the AI to get so smart that it doesn't even need the marketing automation.
Yeah, I think we're probably a long ways away from that, but who knows? Everything's moving at such a fast pace, right? Like you said, the improvements in AI voice quality and responsiveness and have probably been 100x in the last 6 months. And the good news is there are 30 companies working on making it better and better every day.
Yeah.
So who knows what's going to be possible?
So when you guys are investing now, like I talked to some friends, who are investors, they've like shifted the majority of their investing to AI. Like, do you take that lens and say the majority of our investing should be AI, or you take a sort of more considered approach to it? Let's say.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't think of AI as a vertical, right? We think of AI as an enabling technology. And so regardless of what kind of company you are, you should have an AI strategy or an understanding of how AI can benefit your business. In the same way, like there was a period of time where you had to have an understanding of how the cloud could benefit your business or how mobile could benefit your business, right? So there are obviously AI companies that are kind of core AI infrastructure, like LLM companies or even data labeling companies or vector database companies. Like there's infrastructure that's going to be AI specific, but in terms of how we think about investing, when we're thinking about kind of end user and end business applications, we really look at AI as an enabling technology. So we're not all of a sudden AI investors, but if your business doesn't have an understanding of how to leverage AI, you're probably not likely to attract capital from us or anyone else for that matter. And we've always been investing in businesses that leverage data, and that used to, at some point that was called big data, and then it was called machine learning, and now it's called AI, which is kind of the natural evolution of things. So yeah, it's a little odd to us that there are investors who are now AI investors or funds that are AI funds, but everyone
Sovereign
has
wealth
to.
funds that are now $40 billion AI funds.
Right, right, yeah.
So as you think now, about the successful career you've had, I guess, like if you went back to the beginning, like would you do it all over again? Or like what would you tell yourself like back at the beginning?
Yeah, I would certainly do it all over again because I feel very fortunate. I know Hunter does too, and our families do too, to be doing what we're doing and have the opportunity to continue to work with people who inspire us every day and who teach us every day. And we get to spend our time trying to support them in whatever ways we can. And there's nothing kind of more gratifying than that. So certainly wouldn't like say do anything differently. But my advice to myself would be probably have more patience in making decisions about what to work on and who to work with. Like I think it's when you use that framework, it's easy to like be reactive to like the next best thing. And I'd say like potentially have more patience. And the second thing is you have to be your own best advocate, right? Like no matter who you have as a manager or as a boss or like people who, help you out, at the end of the day, no one's going to advocate for you better than yourself. And I think there was a period of time where I like waited to be recognized for my work or like wasn't as aggressive in asking for the next big opportunity or project. And I probably would have taken more initiative myself in some of those areas.
Yeah, it's good advice. And so, now without giving away the secret sauce, as like, when you and Hunter go on your, I don't know, I'm imagining your annual offsite doing something fun,
Quarterly offsites. Yeah.
quarterly offsite when you're going, and doing something fun, what themes are you thinking about going forward? Or like, what's something maybe you believe is going to happen a year from now that other people don't see yet?
It's probably not contrarian, but we think there's going to be far fewer venture capitalists in the next half decade than there are today, and that the industry is continuing to barbell where you either have to be a very, very large fund that's multi-stage, or you've got to be a very small fund and be able to really focus on whatever stage or sector you're focused on. And anybody in the middle is going to get eaten alive by either end of the market. The second thing I'd say is that, like a lot of the hype cycles, we are in an AI hype cycle, and that there's going to be, over the long term, incredible successes, but in the short term, a lot of pain for both founders, employees, and investors who've kind of rushed into AI almost indiscriminately in terms of dollars allocated, valuations paid, and um, understanding of an ecosystem that is moving very, very quickly. And then, from a what's truly contrarian, I think we've always believed that it's not just the team or just the market, right? It's not the jockey or the horse. It's like the jockey, the horse, and the track for us, meaning the team, the market opportunity, and the product vision. And I think there are lots of people who have taken the approach of you only need the team or just the market, and we're big believers that all three of those things need to be in place for success. And we think that's going to be even more true in the next decade of company building than it has been in the past decades. So we probably think about it a lot differently than a lot of investors do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. If people are interested in, getting investment or reaching out, how should people engage with Homebrew or with you?
Yeah, we're easy to access our website. Our emails are on the website, sacha@homebrew.co. You can find me on X, though rarely now, or Twitter. I still can't call it X, really. Twitter at Sacha P and at Homebrew. So we're easy to get a hold of, but we don't require warm references, warm referrals. Like, people are welcome to reach out to us. A warm referral never hurts, certainly, but we try to be as open as we can be, and we try to respond to every email that we get in one way, shape, or form.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Good chat.